Hi everyone, True Deal Tom here. Thought I'd make a fairly unstructured video just giving my thoughts on the matter, but firstly I'm doing a Q&A video in celebration of reaching 3,000 subscribers, so please leave questions on this video. I read all the comments and I won't miss you, but you can also tweet at me as well. But anyway, let's move on to the topics of this video. Pornography. If you are a man, no matter how pure you believe yourself to be, even if you are a God-fearing Christian, chances are you have watched pornography at some point, while if you are a woman, it is still probable that you have also watched it sometime in your life, as a third of pornography consumers are female. Pornography is a giant industry and its consumers are vast. 35% of all internet downloads are related to it, and 1/4 of all search engine queries are also related to pornography. Now, of course, many people will watch this video and systematically respond with some complaint about how I should just let people do what they want, but they would be missing the point of my video. I am someone who seldom argues to infringe on the actions of consenting adults, and this video will be the same. This isn't an argument about legislature or why people shouldn't be able to act voluntarily, rather about how they can best act voluntarily, similar to how Super Size Me isn't advocating for illegalizing McDonald's, but just trying to persuade the viewer to live a healthier lifestyle. So that being said, let's begin.
My name is Dutch, never fail, never Dutch, never fail, never
Constantly when the ethical status of pornography is raised, most people's objections rest on the fact that the woman involved may not want to be there. Now, despite the fact that they consented and thus it doesn't matter, many people will act like the fact that the porn actress may not like the decision between going to college or doing porn, or I guess looking for work like what most people would have done, this somehow nullifies the fact that they chose to do it. So moreover, I won't be arguing that pornography is or should be a crime, because that is a position I don't hold. But to continue, feminists over the last few decades have proposed that pornography objectifies women and it reinforces sexist stereotypes in men, causing us to not value women for anything but their physicality, to think good women are the ones that are over-sexualized and promiscuous, and even to view women as inferior to men. Now, despite not seeming to mind women being objectified through hashtag free the nipple and the slut walk and a plethora of other things, this is blatantly false. In fact, the opposite happens. There is evidence to suggest that as people watch porn, they lose their sense of traditional gender roles. They become more egalitarian, they become more accepting of deviant and alternative lifestyles, and they no longer want to commit to traditional relationships. According to a study named Is Pornography Really About Making Hate to Women?, pornography users hold more gender egalitarian attitudes than non-users in a representative American sample. People who watch porn hold more egalitarian attitudes, being more positive towards women in positions of power, towards women working outside the home, and towards abortion than non-users of pornography. In addition, psychologist David J. Lee, in an article on Psychology Today about sexual integrity, wrote in reference to the study and others, quote, "An interesting effect happens as people watch pornography. They become more egalitarian and more supportive of women and men sharing roles and work, less accepting of gender-based discrimination. They also become more accepting of sexual diversity and less stigmatizing towards homosexuality. They become less religious and may even experience more crisis of faith. Enjoying porn leads to people changing their beliefs about sex and gender, and in some cases rejecting the dogmatically rigid sex-gender values they were taught in church. Our society is becoming less dogmatic about sex, more egalitarian and more accepting of sexual diversity. Where our pain and struggles emerge from a conflict between these different sets of values, watching porn may in some cases lead to people being more accepting and less judgmental, both of themselves and others. This is why sex therapists are typically required to attend SARs, sexual attitude reassessment seminars, where they are exposed to porn and sexual diversity, and forced to confront and examine their beliefs about the right kind of sex," end quote. And all of this makes sense when considering that All of these traits, role assignments, traditional gender roles, and cognitivist morals about sex all correlate with conscientiousness in an individual, this being the personality trait in psychology that determines how in control people are of their impulses and desires. People with high conscientiousness are good at delaying gratification in order to achieve future goals, while also planning and working hard. These types of people are usually responsible and reliable, and are also perfectionists and compulsive a lot of the time. Now, a trait that is common of people who are low in conscientiousness is the resistance to role assigning. It feels like an infringement rather than anything useful. Thus, people with low conscientiousness tend to not be very conservative, and pornography actually diminishes conscientiousness in an individual. Here is an article on neuroscience entitled "Neuroscience Speaks: How Using Porn Destroys Your Willpower," where author Luke Gilkison writes, quote, "Neuroscience now knows that willpower is a function of the prefrontal lobes of the brain. Scientific studies have also confirmed that using porn over and over actually reshapes these areas of the brain, literally eroding our willpower and our moral compass." Neuroscientists call it hyperfrontality. Hyperfrontality is a state in which there is decreased blood flow to the prefrontal lobes of the brain. Hyperfrontality is observed in schizophrenia patients and is also observed in all manner of addictions. End quote. Now, I've mentioned this many times before on my channel, but there is a wealth of good research on conscientiousness in an individual being one of the largest predictors of political conservatism, and individuals with high conscientiousness are extremely unlikely to be liberals, as has been demonstrated along with a plethora of other personality traits correlating with different political views in two profound studies, one by the well-known Jordan Peterson and colleagues entitled "Compassionate Liberals and Polite Conservatives," as well as a study by Jonathan Haidt and others entitled "Understanding Libertarian Morality." Thus, there is an argument to be made that pornography is a fairly good tool of the cultural Marxists, as it undoes society's cultural enforcement of the traditional family. And the traditional family is the sole best method of distributing resources in society. Having a unit that divides labor between husband and wife is the best method of childbearing, contrasted by single parenthood, in which 90% of welfare recipients are single mothers, 70% of gang members, high school dropouts, teen suicides, teen pregnancies are also raised by single mothers, 63% of suicides nationwide are individuals from single parent families, 75% of children in chemical dependency hospitals are from single parent families, more than half of all youth incarcerated in the US lived in one parent families as a child, while when it comes to same-sex parents, children who are raised as such are more prone to depression, being 2.5 times more likely to experience it as an adult, while suicidal thoughts are 4 to 5 times higher than in children raised by a man and woman, while also children raised by same-sex parents are over twice as likely to be obese, while lesbian parents have a specific set of negative outcomes. A study from the University of Texas reported on by CBN, in which a survey on children raised in both same and opposite sex families wrote that 69% of children of lesbian mothers reported that their family received public assistance, such as welfare at some point, compared with 17% from intact biological families. About half of children of an intact biological family said they were employed full-time, compared with 26% of those born to a lesbian mother, while 14% of kids of a lesbian mom spent time in foster care at some points, compared with only 2% of the rest of the children studied. Overall, less than 2% of all respondents who said their mothers had a same-sex relationship reported living with their mom and her partner for all 18 years of their childhood. If you are a libertarian or a conservative, if you want children who can compete in a capitalistic environment and are less likely to need public assistance, or if you don't want parents needing public assistance, you should be for the traditional family. But back to pornography. The Coolidge effect is a phenomenon in animals in which usually a male will have their sexual interests renewed when a novel mate is offered, replacing an old one, even if they have already had a number of sexual encounters with still available sexual partners. Now, this is evolutionarily advantageous as it allows the male to impregnate multiple females rather than just being settled with one, especially if that species relies on low investment child raising like a rat or a rabbit, as the costs of reproducing with many different mates in a short period is very low. This is documented most obviously when one is to drop a male rat into a cage of 1 or 2 females. It copulates very rapidly, however, after a period of time, the male rat will get tired of its mates and reproduce much less often and will do so unexcitedly. However, if you remove the male rat and put it in a new cage with new female mates, the male will be reinvigorated and copulate just as rapidly as it did the first time. Now, this is documented in humans, especially when watching pornography, as is illustrated in a study appropriately named Men Ejaculate Larger Volumes of Semen, More Motile Sperm, and More Quickly When Exposed to Images of Novel Women, which concludes that when men watch pornography, something similar to the Coolidge effect takes place, and that the excitement of each woman, or man, to appear on your computer screen is reinvigorated when a new novel one is viewed by the responder. Now, the essential neurological reason we bond with people is through dopamine releases in our brain. This is the sole reason we desire sex and can be motivated to pursue it. And moreover, dopamine is often described as a pleasure chemical in high school classrooms and etc. However, this is actually inaccurate. It is better described as a seeking chemical, as dopamine acts as a reward for certain types of behavior, moving us to keep acting in such ways, which explains why it is so often responsible for addictions. But additionally, dopamine increases with novelty, as consuming the same thing over and over again gets boring until it is replaced with something new. Now, what is the significance of this? Firstly, it explains how pornography is extremely addicting, as the satisfaction from continuous use doesn't diminish very easily, as we can always replace what we had watched with a new, more novel and sometimes more unconventional video. While secondly, it is vastly easier to get this primitive longing for novel women from pornography than it is from going out and meeting somebody, while most often being rejected, as is the case for most men. Additionally, dopamine can bring out a plethora of emotions such as anxiety, guilt, disgust, shock, surprise, all of which are experienced when watching internet porn, especially as we delve into more niche, specific, and eventually deviant subject matters, as dopamine is reinvigorated by novelty. But moreover, it also contributes to how pornography warps our abilities to bond with women in real life. Furthermore, high porn usage correlates with problems regarding arousal, attraction, and sexual performance problems, as a plethora of studies suggest that viewers of pornography are at risk of diminishing libido and of erectile function, delayed ejaculation, a preference for using porn rather than having actual sex with a partner, while also obscuring one's conceptions of it as well. Pornography and the Male Sexual Script, an analysis of consumption and sexual relations, is a study on university students in America that has compared the participants' rate of pornography use with sexual preferences and concerns. Moreover, Professor Jennifer Johnson concluded in the paper that although the majority of men consume porn, there existed a direct correlation with increased usage and preferring pornography over real-life sexual encounters, often manifesting itself through conjuring images of pornography to maintain arousal while having sex with a partner, while also many studies suggest that these consequences of watching porn are damaging to relationships, as they are in detriment to a partner's self-confidence. This particular study concluding that women who think their partners watch porn are less sexually satisfied and have less self-confidence. So it seems that pornography has altered the sexual market value of women, and that a supernormal surplus has devalued them in men's eyes, as our brains can't differentiate between artificial stimulus in the forms of pornography and real stimulus as in sex with real women. Thus, when we have a surplus of the most desirable women at our fingertips online, it distorts our perception of ordinary women in real life, as most don't look like, or perform like for that matter, porn stars, bringing us to devalue them on the sexual market. This being further enhanced by the fact that there are not obvious costs of using porn. You don't have to spend time and energy winning a video over, and you can't be rejected by your favorite porn star who could well be more sexually desirable to you than any woman you will ever meet, even if only in the most raw physical sense of the word. Now, the reason I talk about women's sexual market value is because women just don't really watch porn to the extent men do. As stated in Johnson's study earlier, verging on 100% of men watch porn regularly, while more than half of women don't watch it at all, even if having watched it sometime in the past. However, it is clear that this devaluation of women is fairly minimal at this point. Everyone still seeks real women over virtual ones, and with the rise of virtual reality porn and even sex robots, it is very likely that the sexual marketplace will change drastically in the future, especially in an era when men are increasingly blamed for their sexual natures. For instance, the emergence of rape culture, a narrative that smuggles in normal and voluntary behaviors under the title of rape to demonize men, such as drunken, even partnered sex between two intoxicated people, while also promoting sex ed classes that operate under the assumption that all men are potential rapists and need to have the concept of consent taught to them even as adults, while also the constant allegations of toxic masculinity, manspreading, mansplaining, etc. And such toxic attitudes have prompted things like the MGTOW movement, men going their own way, in which men have given up on relationships with women, which is perfectly understandable seeing how widespread these views are. Most millennials will meet women who think these things, I certainly have. But not behold to these women is that they have some extreme competition on the horizon. Maybe not these women specifically, but the females in future generations. They have picked the worst time, technologically speaking, to adopt such demonizing toxic positions. It is evident that these attitudes are pushing men away from pursuing meaningful, long-term commitments with women, and they are increasing the tensions between the genders. They are gender baiting, so to speak. And with the emergence of such a low-cost alternative on the horizon, like sex robots, most experts believe men are just going to be checking out. In 50 years, it will be a norm to choose artificial sex over sex with a real woman, as sex robots can't say not tonight. They simulate a nymphomaniac, just like the hyperbolically sexual characters in porn. In many ways, they are more sexually compatible with many men than real women, and they can't repeat such hostile, feminist mantras. They would accept you, as sad as that sounds, and women know they are the victims in this, that with many groups calling for bans on the development of these robots, while others demanding that they make them realistic. Now, why do women feel so threatened by this? Well, I think it's because women have a monopoly on sex, and to revolt against this monopoly is to revolt against nature. The biological reality of the situation is that the task of reproduction is divided between the sexes. Women select the next generation of humanity and subsequently raise that generation, while men collect resources to provide for women and for children, as women don't have the energy available when they are investing it in child-rearing. Now, we don't practice this as much in modern society. Most women don't raise children until they are much older, and they have a variety of tools to help them do it, usually provided by the state. Thus, they don't spend anywhere near the amount of energy as they would have in primitive times. However, seeing we have only lived in a society that allowed for these alternative, non-family lifestyles for perhaps 100 years or so, our brains haven't evolved away from the traditional division of labor that we've reproduced by for millions of years. One which is syndicated across most mammals, where 80% of women desire to mate with only 20% of men, as men compete with each other and the fittest amongst them are selected by women, allowing the fittest selection of genes to be passed on. So, women have had a monopoly on sex selected for by nature for all of time to ensure the most efficient means of rearing fit offspring. It's just nature that most men are sexual failures while most women have high sexual market values. However, there is another reason which is more contemporary as to why women fear losing their sexual monopoly, or should I say some women, because modern girls have been indoctrinated with the notion that the slim, well-proportioned, nurturing housewife stereotype is something to be avoided if you want to be worth anything. Feminism, cultural Marxism, and the education system has demonized traditional female roles for decades and convinced themselves that they don't need to be healthy, keep in shape, and can have no prospect of raising a family with little consequences. Now, women can go do whatever they want. I'm a libertarian. I honestly don't give a fuck if you're unhappy, but it is undeniable that men are attracted to the stereotypical traditional female. Men want slim, curved women who easily submit to them. It is biology, and no amount of cultural conditioning can change that. Thus, when they see the introduction of these sex robots, and all of them look like Barbie dolls, all of them have big eyes, wide hips, and slim waists, it is breaking a narrative that they have been trying to convince themselves for decades. Thus, it is worrying for them to know that as these artificial mates are brought closer and closer to reality, they will have to conform to traditional femininity more and more so to retain their sexual market value. Otherwise, men will just opt out for the robot and they could have to go without. Because for so long, women have been able to defy their gender roles with little costs because they have had a virtual monopoly on the sexual market. It doesn't matter what they did, they would still get sex because they weren't being rewarded with it, they were giving out the reward. While men, assuming you are straight, have always had to be traditional in their masculinity because doing otherwise would deny one of sex, because women still want traditional men. That is also biology. These last few culturally Marxist generations of women have been able to escape their traditional place in the sexual world through exploiting their high sexual market values, while not allowing men to do the same by only rewarding masculine, desirable men, as men don't do the choosing biologically speaking. Now, of course, when I say this, I'm speaking metaphorically. None of this is coercive or necessarily immoral. It's just unwise. Now, it should also be said that this future is deeply frightening to me. Although a lot of people in the red pill sphere love this, they almost feel a sense of sadism in that women will have to experience having low sexual market values just as they do, and men will be given more bargaining power in the sexual marketplace. However, this will be in absolute detriment to the things that actually matter about traditionalism. Not just feminine women, but healthy, childbearing relationships. And that is my biggest problem with pornography. It is a detriment to human relationships. It obscures our perception of women. It prevents us from being satisfied with the women in our lives. And it cheapens them. When women are the most important people in society, every single good thing about humans that can be traced to genetics was selected for by a woman. But to be more personal and to be anecdotal, I look around at the men in my life and it saddens me. They can't bond with women anywhere as well as they could. And any effort to pursue women is an attempt to recreate what they see on their computer screens. And I've talked about this to them and they know it's true, they admit it to me, they all feel like it's a problem. So, although this video may not have convinced you to give up pornography, I hope it just made you think about it on some deeper level. But anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and remember to follow me on Twitter. I'm posting the dankest memes there. Remember to leave questions for the Q&A video, and also, if you enjoyed this, please consider hitting me up on Patreon. I would love to have more time to make these, and you would be greatly helping me. Just $1 will have all of my thanks. Anyway, catch you later. Decision.